In 1971, Marvin Gaye released his 11th studio album, What's Going On, and not only is it a remarkable recording, but it's a window into Marvin's emotional state at this time, and I think for that very reason, elevates this record into one of the greatest albums ever recorded. And so in today's program, we're gonna go track by track to better understand what makes this so great. But before we do all that, I just wanna take a second and ask you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you to those who already have. All right, on with the video. Now, before we get into the music, I think it's important to talk about what Marvin was going through when he recorded this album. So by the end of the 1960s, he was a very successful singer with a #1 album and several hit singles. And from an outside perspective, it looked like things were going great for him, but behind the scenes, Marvin was becoming disillusioned with the music business. He felt less like an artist and more like a puppet with his record label holding the strings. Motown wanted him to crank out hit singles like a machine, but Marvin felt he had more to say as an artist. Any other singer might have had the option of going to their label, but things were complicated by the fact that he was married to the sister of the president of Motown, and she was also putting a lot of pressure on him to stick to the formula so that he could continue to provide for her and their young son. This, along with other issues, was putting a strain on their marriage, and they would eventually separate in 1973. On top of this, Marvin had been battling depression ever since learning that his singing partner, Tammy Terrell, was diagnosed with brain cancer in 1967. Then in '69, he attempted suicide, but his father-in-law, Berry Gordy Sr., stopped him. Complicating his mental state was his use of cocaine, his problems with the IRS, and his general feeling that society was moving in the wrong direction. After the release of his 10th album in January of 1970, Marvin decided against promoting it and instead focused on himself. He went back to church on a regular basis and started watching classical music performances by the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. He also grew a beard and stopped wearing suits all the time. Around the same time, he started exercising a lot and even took up boxing. The culmination of all this soul-searching brought him back into the studio with the mindset that if he was going to make another record, he was going to do it his way. This is a concept album in the way that the tracks flow together and how all the songs sound similar through the use of recurring lyrical and musical motifs. Now, some places say that the lyrics are coming from the point of view of a Vietnam vet, but I believe the album is coming directly from Marvin's perspective. The songs reflect the things that he sees as problems and expresses how he feels about them. And I believe the central message that threads all of these songs together revolves around the idea of universal love. But what I think is so key to the success of the album is that he's not telling you how to think. In fact, Marvin is very explicit in the thank you section by saying, "The fact that people just won't let us think for ourselves really bugs me, and you shouldn't have to pay any special attention to the lyric on Flyin High in the Friendly Sky." I think the intention going into this album was, here are the things that bother me, and I think you should pay attention to them, and maybe this record can bring about some change. All right, let's break this album down, starting with What's Going On. In the history of album openers, this is in the top 10 for me. It opens with some banter from Marvin's friends, and this becomes a motif throughout the record. I think it gives the music a very personal, familiar feel, and it also helps to ground the songs, especially with the use of strings and choir on this track. The sax also adds a crucial element, giving the song an effortless, floaty feeling. Finally, the drums have a very distinctive sound and feel, reinforcing the concept and cohesiveness of the album. I mean, this song sets the stage for the rest of the album. Another thing that's really interesting about the song is the use of double-tracked vocals. This was the result of a happy accident. Originally, Marvin was trying to decide on which vocal take to use, and the engineer accidentally played both at the same time, and Marvin loved the sound of it. So unlike traditional double-track vocals, which try to be relatively in sync, these vocals are looser. Sometimes they stack up perfectly, but other times they go in two different directions, playing off of each other, almost like Marvin is having a duet with himself. But for me, what makes this so effective is that when they do diverge, this gives extra emphasis to those lyrics. The first two verses are some of the best written lyrics in my opinion. They are simple and to the point, but also poetic and visually striking. Opening with Mother has a dual meaning, with actual mothers crying over sons killed in action, but also Mother Earth. The next line with Brother also has a dual meaning, from his fellow men to his actual brother who fought in the war.
Brother, brother, brother.
And then we have the idea of father, and this to me is a plea to the government, the source of authority. Marvin is saying there's got to be a different way. War doesn't solve anything.
War is not the answer.
I think the overall idea of this song is that we need to come together for change. What we're doing isn't working and people are dying needlessly. The chorus speaks of peaceful protests being met with physical force and how he feels that is the last thing we need. Instead, Marvin asks us to talk it out so we can learn what's really going on. This is his plea for understanding and compassion.
Talk to me so you can see.
During the solo section, his vocal scatting is brilliant. It really shows his effortless talent as a vocalist. The mood it creates is groovy, comfortable, and familiar. The return of the banter grounds this section, keeping it from feeling pretentious. It also gives a sense of community. Marvin is singing to the people, trying to change minds and bring awareness. The second verse section addresses hippies and people on the front lines of the anti-war protests. Marvin states that because they look different doesn't discredit what they have to say. It's imperative that we take time to understand each other.
Bring some understanding here today.
I don't know what else to say. This is just a fantastic song. It is incredibly influential. It is wonderful to listen to, and it's probably one of my favorite songs ever recorded. Moving on to track 2, we have What's Happening Brother. And this is a beautiful companion song to What's Going On. It touches on similar themes and expands into other subjects such as the economy and how the news likes to say everything's going great when regular people are struggling to earn enough money.
Money is tied up and it's ever been.
However, I think where this song really shines is how it's presented as a conversation between Marvin and his brother. And like a conversation, the subject shifts to less serious subjects like sports. And I see this as a subtle commentary on male-to-male conversations and how sometimes it can be hard to really say how we're feeling. It's easier to talk about sports or the world at large versus how things affect us.
Well, I woke up with up in it.
Musically, this song is very similar to What's Going On, and it feels more like an interpretation or reimagining than a song of its own. It has many of the same elements, but the song structure is less complex. And while you can enjoy this song on its own, I believe it is meant to be heard as one part of a whole, as this song really doesn't have an end as much as it seamlessly transitions into track 3, Flyin High in the Friendly Sky. So I believe this song is about Marvin's drug use and how he copes by getting high. He hopes that the drugs will help him forget about his personal problems as well as the problems in the world, but there's a layer of self-awareness as he knows his drug use will lead to self-destruction. He feels stupid for continuing to do it and asks God for help, but his prayers go unanswered. I also get a sense of sarcasm in the use of the word friendly. It's a play on the United Airlines advertising slogan, "Fly the Friendly Skies," and so in this sense, I take it to mean that getting high is a double-edged sword. Yes, there's the high, but there's also the low.
Flying high in the friendly sky.
Musically, this song sounds unconventional, like it meanders through the chord changes. The slower tempo gives it a floaty feeling, like it's embracing the euphoria of getting high, reinforcing the theme of the lyrics. But there's also an up and down feeling with the chord changes, representing the cycle of getting high, coming down, and then chasing the high again. You can also hear an internal struggle going on with his voice as he tends to sing in a falsetto, but it falters at times, like he's trying to stay high, but he can't always quite maintain it.
Without ever leaving the ground.
Now, I know Marvin can hit those notes, but he's doing this on purpose in order to convey the real struggle and pain he feels. Overall, this song is very confessional and a window into his internal struggles. A key change signals the transition into the fourth song, Save the Children, and here we have a spoken word moment from Marvin in which he repeats a very powerful question. Who really cares?
I just want to ask a question. Who really cares?
For me, this expresses the apathy he's feeling at this time. At its core, this song is about the problems Marvin sees in the world and how they're only going to get worse in the future. It's a plea to our collective hearts to make a change. He sings that if we don't care about how our way of life is destructive to the planet, then at least think of the children who will have to inherit a dying planet.
Flowers won't grow. Flowers won't grow.
As the song progresses, you have this beautiful push and pull tension created by the spoken word and the singing that repeats the same line right after.
That's destined to die. That is destined to die.
Marvin just has this soulful, gorgeous way of delivering these lyrics that can be upsetting at times. It drives home the message of the song so beautifully, and you can hear how powerless he feels in the spoken word sections. About halfway through the song, Marvin touches on the great conundrum of environmentalism. How do we fix these problems without disrupting our way of life? His answer is that we should live for life, which I think means we have to sacrifice some aspects of the way we live for the greater good in order to make a better world for the kids.
Live for life.
I really like how the intensity of the rhythm section builds before culminating in a pregnant pause with just the strings hanging in the air and what I think is a vibraphone hitting a couple of soft notes. As the outro begins, his singing is just perfect. His voice cracks on the line, "Who really cares?" and it just kills me every time. It's so good.
Who really cares?
He ends the song with some sweet vocalizations before there's a hard transition into track 5, God is Love. Lyrically, I think Marvin is saying, despite all of our failings and mistakes, there's still hope for us because we have God's love. He gave us everything we need, and all he asks in return is for us to love each other. What I think is so great about this message is that it holds true no matter what you believe. I think that's the main point Marvin is trying to make, especially when we get to the bridge where he references the title track by singing "Love your father, your mother, brother, and sister." Essentially, what Marvin is saying is that if we love each other, we can solve a lot of these problems.
Love your brother, love your brother.
The music overall has this great groove to it. It's very uplifting, full of hope, which helps to support his message. And just when it feels like it's hitting its stride, there's a hard cut into the final track of side 1, Mercy, Mercy Me, the Ecology. Now, while Save the Children covers a very similar topic, Marvin gets much more specific on this track. In my opinion, he was heavily influenced by the news of the day. From the mid to late 60s, there was a big push for environmental awareness in the United States. He also could have been influenced by the first celebration of Earth Day in 1970. That being said, I think this song reflects how much Marvin values the environment, and it's clear from the previous track, the destruction he's seen is an affront to God. And so with this song, he wanted to raise awareness and hopefully inspire some change. I also see some clever wordplay with the title of Ecology, which sounds very similar to Eulogy, and I can't help but feel like that's the theme of this song. It's a eulogy for the environment.
Where did all the blue skies go?
Musically, I really like how this song brings everything full circle, creating a very similar vibe to the title track. But what I think is even more amazing is how Marvin can deliver such a message without it feeling heavy-handed. I mean, he sings with such grace that it's easy to forget that he's singing about some very serious topics. There's also some gorgeous vocalization going on in the background, and it gives this sort of angelic gospel-like feel, highlighting the religious influence over this record. The song ends with a beautiful saxophone solo leading us out to this amazing outro that almost sounds like a keyboard synthesizer. What I really enjoy about side 1 is that it's bookended by these 2 incredible singles, and in the middle we have 4 tracks weaved together seamlessly. They are distinct movements, but all part of a suite of music that together makes for a very powerful side 1. It's cohesive, direct, poetic, and simply beautiful music sung with so much heart and mastery by Marvin. Flipping over to side 2, we have Right On, and immediately it's got a different feel. The music is groovy and danceable. Overall, it feels more like an improvisation than a carefully crafted song, sort of like the band is just laying down the track and Marvin is just in a groove. Thematically, this is very similar to God is Love in that he feels that love is the answer to many of our problems, despite our different backgrounds and economic levels. He says, if you give love, you get peace in return.
Peace of love.
Overall, this is a beautifully arranged song with incredible instrumentation. The bridge section slows down a bit and provides a lot of gravitas to the lyrics. The floaty feeling reminds me of the powerful, blissful feeling that love can give us. The sax playing here is a wonderful addition as it supports Marvin's voice, but then there's this guttural moment that is so powerful. It gives the image of hate being conquered by love, like hate is trying to break through, but Marvin's love quells it. After the final lyrics, the song kicks back into high gear with a groovy flute riding right on top. Then we have this gorgeous, seamless transition into the slower song, Holy Holy. And I really like the wordplay with the title, and I take it to mean to be fully with the love of God. Thematically, this song represents Marvin's belief that the answer to confronting hate is finding God. I mean, he even says that in the dedication. We've got to find the Lord. Allow him to influence us. I mean, what other weapons have we to fight the forces of hatred and evil? And what I think is really cool is that Marvin already told us that God is love. And so even if you aren't religious, I think you can still relate to what he's saying because the concept of love is universal. Musically, this is a gentle hymnal interlude. The rhythm section is sparse and the strings really carry the song. The sax and flute playfully dance in the background and Marvin's voice is powerful and inspired. It almost feels like an a cappella song because of how much his vocals are front and center. Alright, moving on to the final track, we have Inner City Blues, and we return to a funky rhythm section. It's got a great groove to it, but there's a tinge of uneasiness. It's not so happy and carefree. I think this helps to support the lyrics of the song, which revolve around the theme of the haves and the have-nots. Ultimately, Marvin is afraid of the future, feeling like things are going to come to a head if we don't change. Towards the end of the song, we come full circle as everything slows down and we get a callback to the first verse of what's going on. I see this as him saying the more things change, the more they stay the same. And thematically, this is a beautiful send-off, and I think this was the right way to end the album. He so could have left this part out, but instead he gives us this beautiful moment with him and the piano. What's going on is both a question and a statement, and I think Marvin asked himself that many times while making this record. It shaped everything about it, from the songwriting to the lyrics, the production, and even the way the songs are strung together. It's a prime example of an album as a piece of art, as a singular, cohesive work. But beyond the catchy hooks, the impeccable production, and the incredible musicianship, what this album does best is deliver a message and a feeling directly from the heart of Marvin Gaye. This is a guy who's hurting and things aren't going the way he thought they would. He sees all these problems in the world and feels powerless to change anything. The only thing he can do is channel those feelings into music. And this was the result. His soul is embedded in these grooves, and that's why this album is so powerful. It is coming from a deep place. It's raw, poignant, expressive, and when you set it to simply incredible music, that combo is why this album stands the test of time. It shows how something so beautiful can be born out of turmoil and strife. He put it all on the line and it paid off. The 3 singles became radio staples and the album went to #1. But what makes this album so great for me is that every time I hear it, I feel something. It never fails to give me chills and I fall in love with it all over again. Alright everybody, that will do it for today. Be sure to let me know what you think of this album. Also, when you get a chance, I highly recommend checking out the original Detroit mix. The changes are subtle, but after hearing the final mix so many times, I really appreciate the differences. And with that, I want to thank you all so much for watching, but I especially want to thank my members over on Patreon who really help to keep this show going with their monthly support. I'm your Vinyl Geek, and I'll catch you on the flip side.